Today we're going to be studying Nehemiah chapters 11 through 13. The reason why I'm including 3 chapters in this is because there's a lot of names that are in chapters 11 and 12, and I'm not going to read all of them because I'll slaughter the names anyhow. We'll just kind of do an overview of why they're naming all these people. So let's pick up in chapter 11, verse 1. Now the leaders of the people lived in Jerusalem, but the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while 9 tenths remained in other cities. And the people blessed all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. Now, why did they want these people to live in Jerusalem? To make sure that the city's being protected again, that it won't be burned down, the gates won't be burned down, the walls won't be destroyed and burned down. So I think they need more population to be living in Jerusalem. So anybody that volunteers to leave their land of where their home ancestry land has been to go move to Jerusalem is going to be greatly blessed. But the people that may not want to do it, but they know that somebody needs to fill that position, they're going to be drawing by lot. And those people that have their name drawn are going to be told to go and live in Jerusalem, whether they liked it or not. They want the volunteers, but if they can't get volunteers, they'll do the drafting, so to speak. They'll be drawing by lots. Okay, verse 2. And the people blessed all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. Now these are the heads of the provinces who lived in Jerusalem, but in the cities of Judah each lived on his own property in their cities. The Israelites, the priests, the Levites, the temple servants, and the descendants of Solomon's servants, and some of the sons of Judah and some of the sons of Benjamin lived in Jerusalem. From the sons of Judah, and it starts listing all these people that volunteered to go to live in Jerusalem. So it's going to name all those. I'm not going to try to save their names, but there's a whole bunch of them. Then we get to verse 20. It says, And the rest of Israel, of the priests and the Levites, were in all the cities of Judah, each one his own inheritance. But the temple servants were living in Ophel, and Ziha and Zishpa were in charge of the temple servants. Now the overseer of the Levites in Jerusalem was Uzzi, the son of Bani. And then it goes on again with some names, and I'm just going to go on and read verse 23. For there was a commandment from the king concerning them, and a firm regulation for the song leaders day by day. So all these are the Levites that are supposed to be either involved in the music at the temple, maintaining the temple. It lists a bunch of these people and their names of who would have been staying in the temple area and helping take care of the service that was being done in the temple. Okay, so really that ends in verse 36. And from the Levites, some divisions in Judah belonged to Benjamin. It just had a bunch of names again. So we're going to go right into chapter 12. Now these are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, Sariah, Jeremiah, Ezra. And now we got the name of some of these same people that were named earlier about when King Cyrus did issue the decree, and it was Jeshua, that was the high priest, and Zerubbabel, that was the governor. They were appointed that. They were the people that were the leaders that took a bunch of people. It was close to 49,000 people back to the land of Israel once King Cyrus issued that decree. So it's going over some of those, the history of those people that went with Zerubbabel and Jeshua. Okay, verse 22. As for the Levites, the heads of fathers' households were registered in the days of Eliashib, Joiada, and Jehonan. Actually, I don't need to read all these names again. Let me see if there's any more. It's really just going over all those same things. So it says that all those people, it says in verse 26, these served in the days of Joachim, the son of Jeshua, the son of Josadak, and in the days of Nehemiah the governor, and of Ezra the priest and scribe. So some of these names now are the ones that are living in the land during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. So you can see all those names, you can look at them. Obviously, they're going to be different than the ones that came up with Jeshua and Zerubbabel. Okay, so now we're going to get into verse 27 of chapter 12 about the dedication of the wall. They had finished the wall in 52 days. It was amazing. All the nations are amazed at how quickly they were able to do that, but they had God working on their side, even in the midst of their enemies, especially Sanballat and Tobiah, that were trying to cause a lot of problems and paying even Israel's prophets to try to discourage them from doing it. But Nehemiah was determined. He was a faithful man. He asked for God's help. He inspired the people to keep working, even in the midst of all their enemies. With one hand, they were holding a sword, the other hand, they were rebuilding the wall. It was really amazing. I mean, such dedication. This is such an inspiring book to me about how one man can make such a huge difference in a nation just by his faith and how he can inspire other people to rise to the occasion. So now here's the dedication of the wall that they have built in the 52 days. Verse 27. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from all their places to bring them to Jerusalem so that they might celebrate the dedication with gladness, with hymns of thanksgiving, and with songs to the accompaniment of cymbals, harps, and lyres. So the sons of the singers were assembled from the district around Jerusalem and from the villages of the Nephtalites. I don't know if I said that right, from Beth Gilgal, and from their fields in Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves villages around Jerusalem. And the priests and the Levites purified themselves. They also purified the people, the gates, and the wall. Many times when they would go to the temple, they had to make sure that the people had been going through the purification process, that they wanted to be cleansed outwardly. And so they would go do what was called the mikvah. It's a lot like what we look at baptism, that are when people are buried in water. That's what they were doing with the mikvah. They would have been in a flowing stream or like the Jordan River. Obviously, that's where John the Baptist was baptizing. It would be some fresh water that flowed, that they would go into that and they would bury themselves in that water, or later on they built little bath houses type thing, where these pools where people would do at the Temple Mount, that they would all go through these bathing processes. It was called the mikvah, to make sure they were cleansed outwardly. Now, baptism is an inward cleansing. The mikvah was for the outer man cleansing. Okay, verse 31. Then I had the leaders of Judah come up on top of the wall, and I appointed two great choirs, the first proceeding to the right on top of the wall toward the refuse gate. Hoshea and half of the leaders of Judah followed them, with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, and some of the sons of the priests with trumpets, and Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micaiah, the son of Zachor, the son of Asaph. Asaph is the one that, if you read the book of Psalms, during the time of David, we have a lot of the Psalms that were either written by David or Asaph. And his kinsmen, Shemaiah, Azarel, Malai, again, I'm not going to say all these names. It says with all these are musical priests, and it says with the musical instruments of David, the man of God, and Ezra the scribe went before them. So Ezra is at the lead of all these choirs and the people that are playing the instruments and stuff, that they're worshiping God with the instruments. And it was according to what David had been instructed to make the instruments by God, and how to have the music in the temple. He was instructed with all that. Okay, verse 37. And at the fountain gate they went directly up the steps of the city of David by the stairway of the wall above the house of David to the water gate on the east. The second choir proceeded to the left, while I followed them with half of the people on the wall above the tower of furnaces to the broad wall. So that Nehemiah is following them now. When it says I followed, that it's Nehemiah talking. And above the gate of Ephraim, by the old gate, by the fish gate, by the tower of Hananel, and the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate, and they stopped at the gate of the guard. Then the two choirs took their stand in the house of God. So did I, and half of the officials with me, and the priests, Eliakim, Messiah. Again, I'm not going to read all those names. There's a bunch of their names. And it says, and on that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced because God had given them great joy, even though women and children rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar. So you got all the other nations that are hearing this roaring, this worship, this joy that they're worshiping God with on this day. Verse 44. On that day, men were also appointed over the chambers for the stores, the contributions, the first fruits, and the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities the portions required by the law for the priests and Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and Levites who served. Remember, this is what we learned last time, that they had not been keeping this part of the law. They weren't providing the tithes to the priests and stuff. And probably the temple was starting to get in a little bit of disrepair because they hadn't been giving the money like they should have. Now they're making everything right. And they're rejoicing that they're doing the right thing now. Okay, verse 45. For they performed the worship of their God and the service of purification together with the singers and the gatekeepers in accordance with the command of David and his son Solomon. For in the days of David and Asaph in ancient times there were leaders of the singers, songs of praise, and hymns of thanksgiving to God. So they're probably having a lot of these same psalms and that Asaph wrote, that David wrote. That's probably part of how they're worshiping that day. They've got it written down in their book of the law, so they got recordings of all these prayers and everything that David would have been praying. So I think that's part of what they're singing that day. Because remember, the Psalms were prayers or worship put to music. It wasn't just words, it was that they were put to music. And we know that David was a harp player. He was very gifted in music. Okay, verse 47. And so all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah gave the portions due the singers and the gatekeepers as each day required, and set apart the consecrated portion for the Levites, and the Levites set apart the consecrated portion for the sons of Aaron. Okay, so I guess in the days of Zerubbabel, they started out doing that too when they first got there, but somewhere along the way, they ended up not keeping it, and so now during the time of Nehemiah, they're doing it again. Okay, chapter 13. This is going to be the final chapter, and we'll be through our study of Nehemiah. 13, verse 1. On that day they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and there was found written in it. Okay, now I don't believe that in that day or on that day, that it's more of in that day that they read something. So I think this is looking to the future because we're learning that this is Nehemiah had gone back to the king. At this point in the book, in chapter 13, he's coming back a second time to be like a governor. So he had been 12 years in the land, but then he had gone back to serve king as a cupbearer again, Artaxerxes. But then he's going to be making this trip back, and let me see if I can figure out what year this is. I don't know that I have it written down or that it tells us. I was looking to see ahead. I don't think it actually tells us how far ahead. I don't know. We'll keep reading and we'll see if it doesn't identify how many years later this is that he's back again. On that day they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and there was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God because of the sin back in the days of Balaam in Deuteronomy 23, verse 3. You can go back and look at that. Because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So it came about that when they heard the law, they excluded all foreigners from Israel. Okay, so they had been allowing these people to come into the temple area. We're going to see that they're having to make this right now. Now, prior to this, before this day came, Eliashib the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah, had prepared a large room for him, where formerly they had put grain offerings, the frankincense, the utensils and tithes of grain, wine, and oil, prescribed for the Levites, the singers, and the gatekeepers, and the contributions for the priests. But during all this time, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked to leave from the king, and I came to Jerusalem. So he's coming back now. This is his second visit after having gone back to serve Artaxerxes. He goes back, but then he asked to be allowed to come back to Jerusalem. This is what he's finding has happened. And I came to Jerusalem and learned about the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah by preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. So he was not supposed to be in the temple area. That's where they were supposed to be storing the extra tithes and stuff like that. And instead, you got Tobiah and Eliashib. I mean, Tobiah's got a room in there, and Eliashib is the priest at this time. He's the one that approved it because he's a relative. He's the father-in-law of Tobiah. Now it was very displeasing to me. I think he's the father-in-law again. I might have that wrong. That it's actually Tobiah. I'll have to look later, but I think that Eliashib, the high priest, is related to Tobiah. Thus he gave Tobiah a large room. That's all the note I have. But anyhow, he's a relative, and that's why he ends up giving him this place in the temple when he shouldn't have. There should be no Gentile, no Moabite, and no Ammonite that's in there. So obviously that's part of Tobiah's background. He's not supposed to be there. And it says, and it was very displeasing to me, so I threw all of Tobiah's household goods out of the room. Then I gave an order, and they cleansed the rooms, and I returned there the utensils of the house of God with the grain offerings and the frankincense. I also discovered that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, so that the Levites and the singers who performed the service had gone away, each to his own field. So they didn't keep the oath for very long. When he comes back a second time, he's already realizing that the people have broken this oath that they had made that day when they were dedicating the wall. So I reprimanded the officials and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" Then I gathered them together and restored them to their posts. All Judah then brought the tithe of the grain, wine, and oil to the storehouses. And in charge of the storehouses I appointed Shemaliah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah of the Levites, and in addition to them was Hanan the son of Zachar, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered reliable, and it was their task to distribute to the kinsmen. Remember me for this, O my God, and do not blot out my loyal deeds, which I have performed for the house of my God and its services. So this is what, he's asking for God to bless him for trying to make all this stuff right again. Nehemiah has been a good leader. He had the people that were being faithful, I think, during the 12 years that he was there, but he goes away, comes back later, and finds out the people have gone back to their sin again. Okay, verse 15. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in sacks of grain and loading them on donkeys, as well as wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of loads. And they brought them into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I admonished them on the day they sold food. Remember, that was part of their oath that they were reaffirming again after the dedication of the wall, that they would not break the Sabbath anymore. But here they were, breaking it again. They were selling and buying on that day. Okay, verse 16. Also men of Tyre were living there who imported fish and all kinds of merchandise and sold them to the sons of Judah on the Sabbath, even in Jerusalem. Then I reprimanded the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this evil thing you are doing by profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same, so that our God brought on us and on this city all this trouble? Yet you are adding to the wrath of Israel by profaning the Sabbath." And it came about that just as it grew dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I commanded that the doors should be shut and that they should not open them until after the Sabbath. So he's going to take away any temptation by saying, look, I'm no more opening these doors. You're not allowed to talk to these Gentiles that are trying to sell you this stuff. You're going to have nothing to do with it. Then I stationed some of my servants at the gates that no load should enter on the Sabbath day. So Nehemiah is taking his own servants and making sure that nobody goes past that gate. Once or twice the traders and merchants of every kind of merchandise spent the night outside Jerusalem. Then I warned them and said to them, "Why do you spend the night in front of the wall? If you do so again, I will use force against you." From that time on, they did not come on the Sabbath. So he took care of the Gentiles that were wanting to do business with the Israelites that weren't supposed to be doing this. It took them a while before they got it that they weren't going to be able to sell to them anymore on the Sabbath. Verse 22. And I commanded the Levites that they should purify themselves and come as gatekeepers to sanctify the Sabbath day. For this also remember me, O my God, and have compassion on me according to thy greatness of thy loving kindness. So again, because of Nehemiah, he's getting them back on course again to keep the Sabbath day holy. Even the priests, he's saying, you need to sanctify yourselves and make sure you're keeping the Sabbath day holy. Okay, verse 23. In those days I also saw that the Jews had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. As for their children, half spoke in the language of Ashdod, and none of them was able to speak the language of Judah, but the language of his own people. So they were speaking the language of the foreigners, the foreign wives, instead of what the language of the Israelites were. He was very upset about that, and here they are intermarrying again. Verse 25. So I contended with them and cursed them and struck some of them and pulled out their hair and made them swear by God, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor take of their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin regarding these things? Yet among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was loved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, the foreign women caused even him to sin. This was the wisest man that ever lived, King Solomon. His heart went astray because of these foreign wives that he married that he wasn't supposed to be marrying. They turned his heart to idols, and he built temples for these idols. It was very sad because he was, again, very loved by God. He was given the wisdom that he asked for when he wanted one wish or one thing that the Lord would grant him. He didn't ask for riches, he asked for wisdom so he could rule the people well. God gave him that and riches on top of it. And instead of using that wisdom and riches to glorify God, he ended up turning his heart towards these foreign women that turned his heart away from God. Very sad. I'm hoping that he repented by the end. I'm hoping Ecclesiastes chapter 12, when it says, after having looked for the purpose of life, that he finally realized that there's only one thing that's necessary: to love God, obey his commandments, and diligently follow after him. So I'm hoping that he repented, and maybe he got rid of his foreign wives or just didn't have anything more to do with idolatry. I hope so. I don't know. Okay, verse 27. Do we then hear about you that you have committed all this great evil by acting unfaithfully against our God by marrying foreign women? Even one of the sons of Joadah, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was a son-in-law of Sanballat at the Horonite, so I drove him away from me. They had been told earlier that, that's what was going to happen, banishment, if they did not keep their oath. And Nehemiah is making sure that somebody's carrying out what he warned them about. He's doing it himself. Verse 29. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I purified them from everything foreign and appointed duties for the priests and the Levites, each in his task. And I arranged for the supply of wood at appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. And I do believe that God will remember Nehemiah for the good that he's done. He's been a very faithful servant. He's been zealous for God. That zeal allows him sometimes to even have righteous anger to make sure that the people are following the things that they need to follow. If they made an oath and they were warned, these curses will come on you if you break it, then somebody's got to carry that out. And obviously it wasn't being done while Nehemiah was gone. But when he came back again the second time, he made sure that the people were doing what they needed to do, and he took out that wrath on the people, and it was righteous because they had been warned ahead of time what would happen if they broke their oath. So Nehemiah was not afraid to do the right thing, even if he was the only one that seemed like it was standing up at times for doing the right thing. Maybe the others were not aware of it. Maybe they were and they just didn't feel like they could do anything about it. But that spirit that Nehemiah had of God in him stirred him up many times to do things that a lot of men didn't have the courage to do. And that's why I just love this book of Nehemiah. He's a godly man with courage to do things even when everybody's against him. He stands up. If he had to stand up by himself, he would. He made sure that he was worshiping God, obeying the commandments, and encouraging people to do the same. And when they didn't keep their oath, he was willing to deal out the punishment. So I think we can use him as a really great example of a true man of God that started out as a nobody. He was a cupbearer for the king Artaxerxes. I mean, nobody knew of him really, that other than obviously his brother lived in Jerusalem at that time, because it was his brother that brought him the report that got him to go there, that made him so brokenhearted that he asked for the king to let him go back and help his people rebuild the wall and the city. And but anyhow, this is one thing that I do want to mention before we get out of the book of Nehemiah. When you see the prophecies in the book of Daniel, in Daniel 9, it talks about, like, from maybe verses, I don't know, I'm going to guess it's around verse 20 through 27. It talks about the different weeks of Daniel. And it said from the time of the issuing of the decree to rebuild the city, there'll be 483 years, and it says how many weeks it is, 69 weeks. And when you look at how the issue of the decree came for Nehemiah to be able to go back and start rebuilding the wall, if you start the time clock from that, and then from the time that it says then Messiah will come, it comes out exactly right. This is how, again, how exact prophecies can be. Daniel was told many years before Nehemiah was going to come on the scene with this situation that these are the different weeks that God had planned. He had a pattern of things, of 70 weeks of completing something. We have not completed the 70th week yet. They got to the 69th week where Messiah was going to be crucified, but now we're waiting for Daniel's 70th week where the Antichrist is going to come on the scene, and there's going to be a final 7 years before Jesus will set up his earthly kingdom. And so when you look at the exactness of the days that Nehemiah was from the issuing of the decree to rebuild the city, that was during Nehemiah's time, his year that he goes back, and you add what it says that it would be for the weeks, it comes out exactly right. So we can trust that the last week of Daniel, that 70th week, will be exactly the way it is told it's going to be as well. All the details it gives us about the Antichrist, how what's going to be happening to God's people during that time, a time of tribulation, unequaled from the world, never to be equaled again. The same thing that Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 24, that he says, remember what Daniel said about this abomination, desolation? He's putting a connection between this Daniel 9:27 and what's going to happen with the Antichrist at the end. So it's so interesting. If you start putting all the scriptures together, you'll see how, again, it's just so amazing. How it's so exact because God's the one that wrote it. I mean, obviously, it was the men that wrote it, but God inspired it. It was the words of God that the men wrote. So that's why it's so exact. We can trust everything that's written in it. God's word is true, and it's truly amazing when you actually see all the connections and how God perfectly fits everything together. There's no contradictions.